at their table. What's a perfect cube? I don't like 4, because 4 is just 2 times 2. That's only 2 2s.
12.
How'd you get 12?
8. 3 times.
No, 3 times. I like 8. Why 8?
2 times 2 times 2.
2 times 2 times 2. I like 27. 3 times 3 is 9. It's 27. So what I want you guys to do is to get your calculators out. Oh, yours is in the basement. Are you stinking kidding me? Probably. Brady's probably beating
512.
crap out of it right now.
Probably loves it.
Just ordered 512. 1.5. Perfect cube.
What is?
512.
512 is. That's
8 times 8.
8 times 8 times 125 is 1. Ladies and gentlemen, instead of having to memorize all of those, I want you to go to math on your calculator. And if I get it out of this spotlight, does everyone understand what this fourth option means now? It's a little 3 and then a radical.
That's cube.
It's the cube root. So what I can do now, instead of going, is 16 a perfect cube? I can grab this perfect cube function, so grab 4, and it actually looks like you're taking the cube root. So instead of just square root, instead of just the radical, then now puts a 3 there, which means you're taking the cube root. And I'm going to type in 16, decimal value. 16 is not a perfect cube.
Yeah.
So I go to math. It's this option 4 right here.
No problem.
But if I type in 27, it gives me the cube root being 3. And that's how you're going to start all of today's problems. You're going to find the cube roots of the values that are in the function. All right, or the expression, I should say. This little box here, guys, this is what you're going to be given. I highly recommend writing it at the top of your assignment tonight or just having your notes with you. So we'll talk about what all these A's and B's mean. A is the cube root of the first term. B is the cube root of the second term. So that's how I start these. Remember that this is a 1. So 1x squared. What's the cube root of 1? 1. And what do we think we cubed to get x to the third? That's just x. Just like when you take the square root of x squared, it's x. If you take the cube root of x to the third, it's going to give you x. Now take the cube root of 27, which we did, and that's 3. These become your A and your B value. Okay, guys? So your A value that you're going to plug into the factoring formula is 1x. The B value that you're going to plug in is 3. So the first step that we're going to do each time is to take the cube roots of those numbers. What I need to decide, is this considered a sum of cubes or a difference of cubes? What gives that away?
Sum. Addition.
Zach said sum. Caitlin, because it is addition. If it's a plus, we use the adding formula. If it's difference, we use the subtracting. The only difference here, guys, is where you put the subtraction sign. Okay? Working with it enough, if you're paying attention, you may be able to memorize that, and that's fine. Otherwise, you will have this formula. But I'm going to start off by writing out what it is. You're taking the two cube roots and adding those together, so a plus b. And then you're going to multiply that by the a term squared minus the a times b and plus the b squared. So what we're trying to do is take that factoring that we were doing in chapter 5 when we factored quadratics. So we used to factor like x squared plus 7x plus 9. And we're going to take that and now apply it to these polynomials. So we're going to start factoring things that have a cube root, or that are x cubed, x to the 5th, x to the 4th. And so that's what we're going to study the rest of chapter 6. What I need to do now is fill in my values. We said a was 1x, so this is going to be 1x. If you just put x, that's fine. And then I need to plug in my b value. My b value is 3. I need to take that a term and I need to square it. So you're taking 1x and squaring that. Well, what is 1 squared? Simply 1. What is x squared? Not much simpler than x squared. I usually recommend that students stop at this point and multiply these two things together. What's 1x times x squared?
X, 1/3.
Is that my first term?
Yeah.
Yeah. So far, so good. Those first two terms should always multiply to give us the first term of our sum of cubes. I then have to have minus AB. What does it mean when we have AB? A times B. So what's 1x times 3? 3x. I now have plus b squared. So my b value is 3. I need to square it. And what is 3 squared? 9. The second check I do is at the end of the problem. What's 3 times 9?
27.
Is that what we ended with?
Winner.
So we have the correct answer. You got your signs in the right spot. You squared the right terms. Well, then what's all this other garbage doing here? That's it.
Why are we using?
What's your question?
How did you get A? Like your first step, you did something and it was just.
I took the cube root of 1. Because the coefficient here is 1. So if I take the cube root of 1, that gives me the A value that I'm putting through here.
How did you get 1x? I don't understand.
I can take the cube root of 1 on my calculator. I can't take the cube root of x.
Oh.
So I then said, okay, the cube root of 1 is 1. What did I have to cube to get x to the third? Well, we said that's just an x. So you're basically just taking whatever the variable is and writing it as a single one exponent term. Taylor,
Okay, how did you get that equation? Wait.
how did I get this?
Sum, because it's a plus 27? Well, it says sum of cubes and it says 8 there, or 8 cubed plus b cubed out and stuff. I know from the twos.
You're going to look at the sign here. Was this an addition sign or a subtraction sign? So I choose my sum of cubes.
Okay.
Addition.
Okay.
Yep.
How do you type that in?
How do I type in cube of,
The cube of root of.
you do math, 4, math is over on the left-hand side, option 4, and then 27. Does it give me 3? Yeah. Guys, we have to check our answers. When we FOIL this, there's that x to the third that we said we wanted. If we then keep FOILing that, we get minus 3x squared, and this gives me a plus 9x. If we multiply here, we get positive 3x squared, so we can see that those are canceling out. And then we have here a minus 9x, which we can see cancels out.
Boom.
And then we're left with the 3 times 9, which is the 27. Which is why, as I went and filled this in, guys, I didn't check any of the other products. The only thing I checked were the first two terms multiplied together, the a and the a squared. The only other thing I multiplied together was the b and the b squared. The answer is what I boxed in red. You're trying to factor. Factoring means you find the two things that multiply together to give you a final answer. This is just the check. This right here is just the check. Did I end up with x squared plus, or x cubed plus 27 like I started with? So then I know I factored it. Every time I probably wouldn't, because I'm afraid that we make too many sign errors sometimes when we're multiplying those out. I would definitely check them though on a quiz though. Okay? The check I would like to see you do is this check here. I'd like you to check these 3 signs and make sure that they match the right form. And then I want you to multiply the first 2 together to make sure they give you x to the third, multiply the last 2 together, and make sure they give you 27. That's the check that I think is going to be most beneficial for you guys. All right, let's take a look at the next one, ladies and gentlemen. All right, 64k cubed minus 125h to the third. Go to your calculator. Take the square root of or the cube root of 64.
Oh.
Yes.
What variable is going to have to go with that?
K.
K, because k cubed equals k cubed. I'm going to take my b value and take the cube root of 125. And is there a variable that's going to have to go with it this time? as long as each of these variables is cubed, I can just put a variable with each A or each B. Cody?
We got minus 25, that doesn't matter.
No. We're going to take care of that minus 125, Cody, with the different signs. Because if we look at this one, this is now a minus 125. So I'm not going to use the sum of two cubes. What am I going to use?
The
The
difference.
difference of two cubes. And do we see that these two problems have different signs in them? And so the change in signs from sum to difference is what's going to help me get a negative 125. So I just have to look at the 125. All right? Ty, what was your question?
Can we use the signs when we write the formula? Like cube?
No, I would just write the ending part of it.
So it's like 4K.
Oops. I would just write this stuff here when you're writing down the form.
Okay, so how isn't the, how did you change negative and positive?
Can I fact this to you and show you why it has to change from positive to negative? And I think it's going to make a little bit. Well, I guess here's what it is.
Well,
What's the next?
No, did you do that on purpose? Or?
Yep, these are meant to be two completely different formulas. So what's a negative times a positive? That's how I get the negative b to the third, is by putting the negative in there. And because this sign had to change, this had to become a positive so that everything canceled out and was opposites there in the middle. So that's why the signs have to change to get that minus b squared, or b cubed in there. All right, so now this has to be plus a times b, and this one is always plus b squared. Guys, you don't have to memorize those. That'll be on your note sheet. You guys will get a cheat sheet that you get to bring to every quiz and test with you. All right, so today if you can get practice looking back at that formula, that's going to help for your quiz. I'm going to take a minus b, so that means I'm taking 4k and I'm subtracting 5h. I just plug that a value in, that b value in. That's why it's so nice taking those cube roots at the beginning and writing those a and b values down. I then have to take a and square it. So I'm going to square each part. 4 is 16, and k squared is k squared. Now remember, guys, this is where I told you to stop. Do these two terms multiply to give you 64k cubed.
Yes, you do.
So you've done the right squaring, you've done the right cube rooting. I now need to have plus a times b, so this is 20kh. And now I need to do b squared, so 5 squared is 25. But I have to take care of the h. So the h is also going to be squared, because you're checking. I didn't hear your question. What's negative 5 times positive 25? Negative 125. H times h squared? H to the third. What's wrong, Ty? Where did I get this 20kh from?
No, it's correct.
4k times 5h.
Wouldn't you write it out then?
You mean write it as this, like 4h times 5k? You could. I just do the multiplying in my head over here. If you wanted to write them out like this and then write it as 20kh, that would be fine.
No, but like, I don't know, I guess 16K.
Okay, this says a squared, correct? What's your a value? 4k. What's 4 squared? 16. What's k squared? K squared. This says to take b and square it. What's 5 squared? 25.
That was cool. They just pointed to the right one.
I know, I was impressed. So the only difference there, Ty, is you're having to take those values from the first part of the problem and actually square the numbers involved. And I know to square them because they tell me to square them right there. All right, we're going to do one more and give you a chance to work on it a little bit on your own. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to take the cube root of 16.
Done with the, what was it, that, one from you?
We did finish it. Yep, this is all I need. This is your final answer.
Oh, really?
Yep, the other stuff I did was just
Check.
it was just the checking to making sure it worked out. Yes, one's a perfect cube, one's a perfect square, it'd be a perfect quartic.
One's just a perfect one.
Alright, so ladies and gentlemen, what's the cube root of 16?
It's not a whole number.
It's not a whole number. It's the square root of 16 is 4, but the cube root of 16 does not exist. What about 250? What's the cube root of 250?
250.
I don't think that's right.
It's not. Ladies and gentlemen, is this even m to the third?
6.299605.
Exactly, we can't use it. So Mr. Weber, when you take the cube roots and they come out to decimal values, what that's telling you is that there's some greatest common factor. So I have to find some number that divides into 16 and 250. I'm pretty confident 16 doesn't divide into 250, so I might try 8. So does 250 divide by 8? No?
No.
What's the next number we could divide into 250?
9.
4?
No.
4? So does 250 divide by 4? So what's the next number that might divide into 2 goes in there. And what's very nice is when you divide both of these by 2, what's 16 divided by 2?
8.
Is 8 one of our perfect cubes?
Yes.
Yes. And what was 250 divided by 2? 125. Was 125 part of our perfect cubes? Yes. Guys, notice I left a big space here. Because 2 isn't our only greatest common factor. After our assignment that we graded, what else do we have to look at?
Variable.
Variables. So Ty, do they both have an m? And what's the smallest exponent? So that means 2m squared is my greatest common factor. The nice thing about that is, once we have 5 m's and we factor out 2 of them, that leaves me with m to the third, which is what I need. I have to have a cubed variable. If you have m squared and you take out 2 of them, that leaves you with no variable, which is what I want to see there, which is what I'd like to see there at the end.
That was.
So now I'm going to go and use these for my, starting with my a and b values. So at this point, I'm going to ignore the 2. M squared, I'm going to ignore that greatest common factor. So to find my a value, I'm going to take the cube root of 8. And I've got to remember to put the variable with it, because 2m is what gives you 8m cubed. I have to take the cube root of 125, which hopefully you don't need to use your calculator for. You can look back at example number 2. And that's 5. So what I'd like you guys to do, this is the difference of 2 cubes. I want you guys to fill out the formula for it yourselves.
God.
Well, what does the end here say? Okay. What's your b value?
5.
So you're going to do 5 squared. ladies and gentlemen, I think I see quite a few 2m minus 5. I then see 4m squared for that 2m squared, so 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 5 is the 10m. And then I have to square 5, which is 25. Not our final answer, though.
What?
Why? Your greatest common factor has to come back into your final answer.
I have that.
Your job is to get everything multiplied together to give me 16m to the 5th. And so now you've got 2, 3, 4, 5 m's, which is what we needed here. So you always can do that check there to make sure you have those. So this actually is our final answer. Caitlin.
You don't have to have an M with the 25.
This says b squared, right? What was your b value? 5. So is there any m to put with b squared? No, so we're fine there. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, your assignment is in the book. You need to get that out and get started, please and thank you.